Hello, hello, hello. Okay, so um, Inspector Calls, a little bit of a revision video here. So just before I get into it, remember you can look at any of the videos on this channel. Make sure you subscribe to it. Make sure that you're going to get those videos popping up on your subscription feed, and make sure you are watching them and doing what they say and making notes. They're all well and good, but if you're writing things down whilst you're watching, making yourself mind maps, some diagrams, it's going to help you remember it more. So with that, let's jump in with themes in Inspector Calls. So remember, we've got our 6 characters. Yes, we've got Edna as well. She's in there. We might talk about her, but we're going to look at 4 main themes here today. So we've got responsibility, gender, class, and age, and we're going to take them in order. And the first one, probably the most important, the one that's sort of most pertinent, most in your face throughout it, is responsibility. Okay, this is a primary theme. This is a theme that really sort of jumps out at us. Okay, words like responsible, responsibility are used again and again and again throughout it. Okay, and this whole play, the whole point about it is this discussion of personal responsibility and social community responsibility. Should we have responsibility for others? Are we just responsible for ourselves and nobody else? Excuse me. So the inspector wants each member of the family to share that responsibility of Eva's death, and you can see there's a quote here. One Eva Smith is gone, but there are millions and millions and millions of Eva Smiths and John Smiths still left with us, with their lives, their hopes and fears, their suffering and chance of happiness, all entwined with our lives and what we think and say and do. Now that's a really important quote, not only because that's more of a generalized thing, Eva Smiths, John Smiths, but that's reminding us there that there are people throughout this world that we distance ourselves from, but actually we are completely connected. They are part of our community. We are intertwined in different ways, whether it's through them working in a shop that we work in, or just we take the same train to work each day, say, but we are intertwined. And this play is a real discussion of uh, that social responsibility, about how we are not one person, we are a collective. And the inspector warns Berlin, and I tell you that the time will soon come when, if men will not learn that lesson, when they will be taught in fire and blood and anguish. Now remember, with this responsibility aspect, think about when the play is written and when the play is set. So the play is written sort of after the war, 1940s, but it's set in 1912. So you've got the added benefit here of the audience watching this play after having seen 2 wars, the sinking of the Titanic, union strikes, economy collapse, and they're watching these characters that was them 20, 30 years ago, um, and seeing themselves in there, and seeing that, and having that reminder of they're about to live through these things. And think about Berlin at the beginning. Oh, the Titanic won't sink. Nobody wants a war. This Labour's dispute is nothing. Think about those in the audience watching that and thinking, oh, that was us. Yeah, that would be really effective to them. But in terms of responsibility, that question there, why would Priestley want his audience to think of this when when the inspector is giving all these warnings? Well, it's that exact reason. It's that reminder of, you need to take responsibility. We need to be a community here, not just one person. We need to help everyone. That socialist view, that idea that we are all one, the needs of the many, we help each other, we support each other. Reminding them that we didn't do that then, and look what happened. Okay, from now we need to do this. So some key quotes here in terms of social responsibility and their attitudes to it. So Mr. Burling there first. A man has to make his own way, has to look after himself and his family too, of course, when he has one. He doesn't believe in that social responsibility. He thinks we look after ourselves. Even, at the beginning, think about that huge speech he makes about if we all had to be responsible for each other. And remember, the inspector rings that doorbell right in that speech, cuts him off almost, and that's when he arrives. And that's a real tell of this conversation of social responsibility. But again, even afterwards, he's still fighting it, isn't he? You know, even after the Inspector Ghoul has gone and Gerald comes back and it's all fine, there is no responsibility there. Even after knowing, well, what he did do, he still doesn't have that responsibility. Mrs. Burling, again, she's in the same boat. Her social responsibility is really, really limited. It's difficult with her because she is involved with that woman's charity, and she is, we assume, helping some women, but refuses help for Eva because of that sort of social class element. But she takes no responsibility for that. As far as she's concerned, it was the girl's own problem. She was pertinent, she was rude, using Mrs. Burling. She lied. Actually, we know that she didn't. She was carrying Eric's baby. That he had been stealing money, but obviously she's not aware of that, and so there's that lack of responsibility. But even after she learns about Mr. Ghoul, Inspector Ghoul, I do apologise, and the truth comes out, there's still no responsibility. As Sheila says, we still did these things, but Mrs. Burling doesn't seem to take that on board. Then we come to the younger two, Eric. So he has this sense of social stability. Why shouldn't they try for higher wages? Eric's already fighting that social responsibility, that socialist corner, right at the beginning. He challenges Gerald and Arthur when they're sort of talking about the dismissal of Eva, and he also kind of jumps in at the beginning before the inspector even gets there. He feels that responsibility. We see that when he offers that girl money, when he offers Eva money to keep her safe and to provide for her, he was instantly accepting responsibility there to try and help through what he caused by getting her pregnant. And then Sheila, she has a sense of responsibility, and it's awakened in the play. She has it because of this experience with Inspector Ghoul. And that quote there, but these girls aren't cheap labour, they're people. That's a really good key quote there to think about. They're people. Yeah, that's kind of this idea of the play of stepping back and going, everybody's a person. We're all the same. We should support each other, and Sheila's a good example of that. Okay, so class. Now, apart from Edna, I know some of you will be glad to see Edna popping up there. They're all rich, they're all upper class, the ones that we see and we interact with. But we can actually learn quite a bit, from their interactions with Edith Smith. Have a look at, the Burling's reaction and Gerald's reaction to each person. Sheila understands, they're people, back to that quote, understands that actually this was just a person, class doesn't come into it. And Eric as well, with the acceptance of, I was going to marry her, that was there. And Gerald as well, when Sybil says, it's disgusting, when she's learning about that affair that they had, Gerald steps in. It wasn't disgusting, actually. I think, there's that understanding of, we weren't that different. But, with our two elderly members of the Burling family, Sybil and Arthur, there's definitely this class divide. We see it with Edna, and don't worry, Edna will get it. There's very much that's the servant, that's the maid, that does who does the job. But remember, everything in this play is linked to Priestley's socialist views. He is a socialist. And think about when it's written again. Think about that change of time. Think about what was going on at that time. They're coming out of two wars. They're coming out of huge social decline, economic decline. It's really difficult. Okay, make sure that you do have a look at Priestley. Have a look on the internet. Learn up a little bit about him, what he was doing, his personal views, his background, how he was involved with labour movements. That'd be really helpful here. So here at the start of the play, Mr. Burling, he wants his social rise there. That's his class. He's upper middle class, upper class really. But remember, he's new money. He is rich because he worked up to it. So there is that social divide there between. Superior element for Mrs. Burling and Mr. Burling there. And in terms of his relationship with that lower class, that Eva, she's simply cheap labour. He doesn't think of her as a person there. Mrs. Burling, again, socially superior to her husband. She gets embarrassed as well. Oh, Arthur, we don't say things like that when he says, oh, we should thank the cook. Go back to that, find that quote right at the beginning before the inspector comes in. Her response to Eva, she's an upstart, she's pertinent, it was her own fault. That divide between the class there. Sheila, a little bit different, happily takes advantage of her social class. She goes to Millwood, she spends the money, she's flittering away with her lovely dresses and etc. But she sort of understands that social status and that Ava was somebody, and she didn't deserve to be fired. She deserved to be treated correctly and with compassion. She begins to understand that, so there's that less of a gap of class there. Gerald, prepared to marry Sheila, even though she is technically a lower social class. Remember, she's that new money. So in terms of Gerald coming from old money, that real proper higher upper class, Sheila's more upper middle, or low upper class because of Mr. Burling. But then and okay, we know the disapproval as a mother. It's a shame. Lord and Lady Croft couldn't be here this evening. We know why they're not there. It's nothing to do with them being away. They don't approve of this marriage. That's a real problem. But then again, there's still that huge understanding of class divide. Eva was a mistress and she was discarded when he was done with her. She was disposable. She's lower class. Yeah. Eric feels awkward. He's the one, even more so than Sheila, that sort of drives in this idea of class divide and how we shouldn't be. Why shouldn't they ask for higher wage? Oh, I wouldn't have fired her. Things like that. He seems to understand, and I think he's a little bit uncomfortable with it at times. But again, just like Gerald, she was easy. It was a drunken night. She was disposable. In a way, although he's offering her the money, etc., he was trying to kind of hide it away, wasn't he? Okay, gender. Gender is quite a big one in the play. I'm going to probably end up doing its own little video because this is something that's quite interesting. So because Eva is female, she's instantly more vulnerable. Because she's a woman, she can become pregnant. Okay, with a man, that wouldn't be an issue. Because she's a woman, she has lower social status. Because she's a woman, she has less rights. And remember, at this time, think about context. Always come back to context in the inspector calls. Any question on the essay part will always need you to contemplate context. Particularly with gender. Okay, so bring it in. Women didn't have the right to vote. They weren't necessarily valued. They were a wife, they were a daughter, they were a mother. That was who they were. Even in the upper classes, even Sybil and Sheila, it was different. It was worse for women at this time. That respect wasn't there. And Eva sort of wraps all of that up. She's a representation of not only the class divide, the social divide, but the gender divide as well. If she was a man, would this have happened? Would she have been treated the same? Very, very unlikely. Okay, and finally we're going to look at age. The older and younger generations deal with this all very, very differently. So we'll look at the old versus the young. You can see that here. So we'll start from the top. So the older generation, Mr. and Mrs. Burling, they're kind of set in their ways. They're very, very confident that they're right and that the other two are wrong. And they really push that. Think about that ending after Inspector Goole is gone and before that final phone call. When they realise it was a hoax or it was fake and he wasn't really an inspector. They really go into town with Eric and Sheila. Oh, they're young. Oh, you're being stupid, you're being foolish. Oh, they had you. You know what I mean? Really, really pushing it. Whereas, and that no responsibility accepted there. Whereas with Sheila and Eric, they're much more open to that, and they change throughout them. They express that sympathy, and they express that understanding of, oh, we need to change here. They'll do anything to protect themselves, Mr. and Mrs. Burling. In fact, Mr. Burling's first point of call is to go, how can we cover this up? Oh, if this comes out in the inquest, It really, really, oh, we must protect ourselves. Simple as that. Reputation. Whereas Sheila and Eric, the younger generation, there's that acceptance. There's that understanding of what they've done and that they need to accept and take responsibility for that. Again, we go back onto the older side, Mr. and Mrs. Burling. Never ever been forced to examine themselves again. You can't teach an old dog new tricks. Sybil's response is, you can't ask me these questions. How dare you come into the home? And Arthur as well. Whereas Sheila and Eric, oh yeah, we'll answer these questions. We'll take responsibility. We'll examine how and what we did to Eva, and we'll discuss that. They're open to that examination. And then finally, again, we go back to the older Mr. and Mrs. Burling. Lots of fear, and they really fear the reaction they will get, the scandal, the loss of reputation, the loss of social standing. That's something that they really, really fear. Whereas on the other side, it's more that fear of, who are we? What have we done? Why can we not take this blame? So when you look at the age divide, you can really see that older generation, Mr. and Mrs. Burling, really capitalist. It all comes down to help yourself, responsibility for self. We're rich because we worked at it. You're poor because you didn't work. Reputation, social standing, class is important. Whereas when we go to the younger side, it's that much more socialist view. That view that would probably tie in a lot closer to Priestley's own thoughts. And that's really interesting to look at there. But remember, just like today's society, the elderly generation, they grew up in a different time, and so would have Mr. and Mrs. Burling. They would have grown up in a time where that was what it was like, and with this new social change, this new socialist movement coming in, Sheila and Eric are growing up with that. That's part of it. Okay, so what I want you to do now, this here is a really good way to practice any question. Okay, so let's say, for example, the question you were going to practice was, how is the theme of, let's use responsibility. Theme of responsibility shown in the play. Okay. Link to context. That's important. Okay. Remember, in this exam, context is really, really important, and you want to keep coming back to you want to keep coming back to context. If you're talking about socialism, capitalism, come back, okay, what was going on? If you're talking about gender, what was going on? Make sure you come back to that all the time. Now, what you can do, really simply, you could do this on PowerPoint, you could do this in your book, but if you just come up with lots and lots of different questions, and you will see probably towards the end of the week, I'll put up a video with lots of just different questions that you can look at, and different questions you can try. But now what I can do is I can use these 4 boxes to plan an essay. So for example, theme of responsibility. Okay, so paragraph 1, I'm going to talk about who doesn't. Okay, so Mr. Burling, Mrs. Burling don't accept. I'm going to link that into social status and age. Then the quote I'm going to use, I'm just going to flick back, see if I can grab one very quickly. So I'm going to use this one. Has to look after himself and his family too. So all I do now is, okay, that's the one I'm going to look at, and then I'm going to talk about capitalist views, and how responsibility is shown in that. Responsible, blah 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 blah, you know what I mean. And then I'm going to go to the next one. What's my next paragraph? My next one, my next paragraph, my next one, next paragraph. And then what I have is a 4-plan paragraph. That's the minimum you should be looking at in an essay, thinking about those real structured PEEs. PAs as if you can do them. So PEE, point, evidence, explain. PAs, point, evidence, explain, add, sum up. Okay, again, I'll put up a video looking at how to write them very soon. So that's exactly what I want you to do now after watching this video, is take one of these. All you have to do is change that theme there, and you can do it for any one of those 4, and flick back, pause the video at different times so that you can see those quotes and just really have a look. Okay, so remember, subscribe to the channel. If you have any questions or any answers that you want me to look at, put them in the comments below. You can go onto the Google Classroom, and I'll be sharing that link very soon, or email it to me. Most of you know my school email anyway, but if you go into your school email and you start typing in my name, I will come up. Send it to me, let me mark it, let me see what you're getting on with. Make sure you look at the other videos, make sure you have a go at this. If you created a PowerPoint on your own personal computer, and for Heroes, Inspectacles, Mice and Men, if you just made one of these like every other day, in 2 weeks you'd have about 7, 8, 9 different essay plans. Boom, they're there. Okay, so go through this, make some notes, make yourself some revision notes, get to revising please, and make sure you're looking at these other videos. I'll be uploading a couple every day. Make sure you're having a look, and look after yourself. Goodbye.